Plans are emerging to build a sizable new homeless shelter in Salt Lake City. The Utah Office of Homeless Services announced today they have just entered a contract to buy city-owned land in a small farming area on the north end of town, and it's raising concerns for the neighborhood. News specialist Brian Carlson is there live for us. Brian, now go ahead and just walk us through these plans for this new homeless campus.
You bet, Tamara. So this campus is going in right next to I-215, just north of the 2100 North exit. Now, maybe tough to see from these trees here behind us, but you've got 15 acres back here that the state plans to acquire to build Utah's new homeless campus.
Utah has a plan to deal with homelessness, lining up behind President Trump's belief that people should not be allowed to sleep on the streets. State officials say they're preparing to pull more than 1,000 homeless people out of Salt Lake City and into a sprawling campus on the outskirts of town. Supporters call it a place where people can get the services they need. Critics call it a detention camp.
Welcome back, friends. Thanks for choosing to join me this evening, this afternoon, this morning, whatever time you are watching, for this latest installment of unwatchable content. And in today's video that no one is going to watch, we're going to be looking into a quite frankly disturbing story that is coming out of Utah, that has been developing over the last 3 or 4 months now. And this story from Utah, as you probably may have guessed from the title of this video no one's going to watch, Utah camps Vagrant solutions. And the story is that there is a homeless camp that has been opened up in Utah that can hold up to 1,300 individuals, and there are rumors and stories that the homeless people that are being presented with not really the choice to go to these vagrant centers, these homeless campus that they are calling it. Now, recently Donald Trump signed an executive order regarding the homeless people, stating that the homeless, shouldn't have to sleep on the streets, and it is in fact a crime. And Utah is a state that has now opened up one of these homeless campuses, and the choice that homeless people are presented with is either go to jail or go to the homeless camp. I don't know if there is a third alternative to that, but it is a very, very disturbing story indeed, and it is disturbing even more so because it was about 18 months ago I first reported of the situation regarding migrants, and at the time of recording that video, Migrant Solutions, we looked at the fact that there's a lot of news articles and propaganda regarding invading immigrants to the United States southern border, and many of these immigrants were not only arriving on foot but also arriving on trains. Now, doing a little digging and diving, I did come up and find that FEMA, our fine friends at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, have a whole system designed and catered for housing and detaining, if you like, to put it in the actual terms, immigrants. And incidentally enough, that system is known as the shelter system. For those of you not joining the dots there, that is SS. And within this shelter system, some of the facilities that FEMA has in order to house these immigrants while they are seeking advice on their immigration status are known as second stage facilities and soft-sided facilities. And upon arrival to these camps, immigrants and migrants are ushered to a shower station where they are supposed to get themselves cleaned up before they are then rehoused. Now, all of those things, a second stage facility, soft-sided facility, and shower station, again, all begin with SS. Now, I'm not going to go too much into Migrant Solutions. The best thing you can do if you're unfamiliar with that video is go and watch it for yourself. It's very, very, very interesting, very, very telling, and there is a lot of information from the government itself supporting that there are shelters in place, ready and well waiting to house individuals that will be designated for those shelter systems. Now, not only that, FEMA also have a policy known as the mass care strategy, which again is a video I've made regarding this topic with the documents from FEMA themselves. And also this works out to little more than a shelter system, and in times of emergency, could it be a weather-related emergency, a hurricane, a flood, something like this, or an earthquake, then with prior knowledge, FEMA would be able to round up citizens or individuals in the target city and house them in these mass care facilities. And again, a lot of the operations within that mass care strategy also have SS references for their camps, and I did put up a video called Shelters in Place. And back to where we are going to be talking about today, there are now shelters or homeless camps or labor camps cropping up, and the first one is in Utah, although I have heard a story in the last 24 hours from the New York Post suggesting that Congress is actually going to block this executive order that would legalize or make it legal for law enforcement in the state of Utah to round up homeless people and say, listen, you're either going to this shelter or you're going to jail. What the other alternative is, we don't bear to consider about. But the other interesting thing about this is that this is straight out of the National Socialist playbook, because not only did Adolf Hitler have an ethnic cleansing policy, he also, that was running in conjunction with this, a social cleansing policy in which he removed undesirable members of what he wanted to be the supreme race, the Aryan Brotherhood. This was something he also did, as opposed to sort of getting rid of Jewish people. He also targeted homeless, vagrants, peasants, homosexuals, and they were forced to wear a black triangle once they'd been sort of segregated and picked out of society, and then designated and relocated to certain labor or detention camps, which we all know were death camps. Now, is the United States exterminating migrants and homeless people? Is not something I can say with 100% certainty, but there are a lot of policies, there are a lot of executive orders, and there are a lot of governmental facilities ready and waiting in place to house migrants, to house homeless people, and to also house homeless people that may be affected by natural disasters. All of this information is contained on this channel in some very, very, very long videos. Hopefully this one isn't going to be too long, folks, but we are going to be looking at some government documents regarding this homeless campus, and we are also going to be looking at a video or two and a few articles before we wrap things up. So without any further ado, folks, let's head over to our first article of the day. So before we start diving into some contemporary governmental documents, let me just take you on a little brief history lesson. And we're here at Google, where we're at the AI mode to get an AI overview. And the reason being, we're using an AI overview for this piece of information is to save me providing you with an hour or so of content going over Nazi methodology, propaganda, and tactics. So this AI overview is about Adolf Hitler and his cleansing of homeless and undesirable people. And it starts out by saying Adolf Hitler's regime targeted the homeless, beggars, and other asocials for persecution, sending them to early concentration camps as part of Nazi efforts to purify society and control perceived undesirables. Where we heard undesirables before. But with large roundups occurring in the mid-1930s, while ironically Hitler himself had experienced homelessness as a young man in Vienna, the Nazis used propaganda to frame these crackdowns as improving public order and economic stability, linking them to their winter aid programs. Now, we already have roundups that ICE are rampant daily in multiple cities, carrying out raids in rounds up of illegal immigrants, but again, that's sort of a topic for another day. But we are in a time in the United States of America where we do have a governmental agency that has been referred to as the Gestapo or as the SS, that is rounding up immigrants, and this in itself is an echo of post-World War II National Socialist Germany. And as we are discovering in this artificial intelligence overview, that Hitler and his Gestapo buddies also targeted homeless people, beggars, handicapped folks, people with mental health issues, as well as homosexuals. They didn't want anything to tarnish their perfect race. But Nazi persecution of the homeless, back to the overview, asocials, the Nazis grouped beggars and the unemployed, alcoholics and others not conforming to their norms under the label asocial. And I'm going to just point something out there, that non-conforming is a little bit like non-complying, and something we heard 5 years ago was the new normal, and people refusing to comply with some of those things that were asked in order to prevent the spread of a certain virus. Concentration camps. Starting in 1933, concentration camps would be CC 33, and it started in 1933. So you got all the numbers going on there, folks. So starting in 1933, laws allowed for the incarceration of habitual criminals and asocials in cows like Buchenwald and Dachau. Propaganda campaigns portrayed beggars as a nuisance, claiming their removal would create a sense of relief and economical improvement, notes Uni Cassell. Mass arrests, and again, this is what we're seeing with ICE and immigrants, but mass arrests, and is it about only a matter of time before this is happening to homeless people? But major sweeps occurred in 1938 with thousands of homeless and asocials sent to camps wearing black triangles to mark them, and the Jews used to wear a yellow star on their clothing, or they had an armband that they had to wear at all times to identify themselves. And if you weren't Jewish but were still not in requirements to the Aryan Empire's ambitions, then you were forced to wear a black triangle until you were relocated to one of these camps. But Hitler was homeless in his youth days when he was living in Vienna, because of course he was an Austrian by birth, he wasn't a German. But before World War I, Hitler lived as a homeless man in Vienna, and he stayed in a men's hostel from 1909 to 1933. Erstas University, he described this period in the hospital as harsh, and he developed his political ideas and practiced public speaking among his fellow residents, including Jews, that is from The Guardian. Contradiction. His own experience with poverty and homelessness contrasted sharply with his regime's subsequent persecution of the poor and marginalized, and that is also from The Guardian. Now, these are the articles in which the AI overview took that information and compiled the best bits together. Vagrants and beggars in Hitler's Reich, and that is a very hard to read PDF, which which I did download, which is another reason why we are reading the AIO review. It's a little bit easier and a little bit more to the point than going through some of these long articles. There's homelessness in Germany from Wikipedia, early Nazi incarceration sites, that's from the City University of, let's click on there, concentration camps, where is it from? See, so this is quite a long article. You can actually listen to this if you so like. It doesn't actually tell us. khc.qcc.cunny.edu. Yeah, quite a mouthful there. But here are some of the articles that were used to compile that AI overview. So with that out of the way, guys, and as I said, I just wanted to use this to show you that and highlight that the past is echoing very loudly in present days, and it's echoing even louder now that Trump has targeted the homeless and has camps ready and waiting for them. So without further ado, folks, let's head over to the White House next to hear what they have to say about these homeless campuses. As promised, here we are at the whitehouse.gov, official government website, directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Ending crime and disorder on America's streets. Executive Order, July 24th, 2025. By the authority vested in Donald Trump as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered, Section 1, Purpose and Policy. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. Remember the article we just heard about? The number of individuals living on the streets in the United States on a single night during the last year of the previous administration was 274,224. This was the highest ever recorded. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have a mental health condition, or both. Nearly 2/3 of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like methamphetamines, cocaine, or opioids in their lifetimes. An equally large share of homeless individuals reported to suffering from mental health conditions. The federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes. And root causes, if we sort of got rid of homeless people, there wouldn't be any more homelessness, leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment, CC, will restore public order. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. Mr. Trump's administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. It's all for your safety, folks. Restoring civil commitment. The Attorney General in constitutional with the Secretary of Health and Humane Services shall take appropriate action to seek the appropriate cases, the reversal of federal or state judicial precedents, and the termination of consent decrees that impede the United States policy of encouraging civil commitment of individuals. Read that again. Termination of consent decrees. So it doesn't matter, folks, if you comply or not. If they terminate a consent decrees, the policy of encouraging civil commitment of individuals with mental illnesses who pose risks to themselves or the public, or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves, in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time. Provide assistance to state and local governments through technical guidance grants or other legally available means. mechanisms for the identification, adoption, and implementation of maximal flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step-down treatment standards that allow for appropriate commitment and treatment of individuals with mental illnesses who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. Section 3. Fighting vagrancy on America's streets. Wars on terror, wars on drugs, now a war on vagrancy, people. The Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Humane Services, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the Secretary of Transportation shall take immediate steps to assess their discretionary grant programs and determine whether priority for those grants may be given to the grantees in states and municipalities that actively meet the below criteria to the maximum extent permitted by law. 1. Enforce prohibitions on open illicit drug use. 2. Enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering. 3. Enforce prohibitions on urban squatting. 4. Enforce and, where necessary, adopt standards that address individuals who are in danger to themselves or others and suffer from serious mental illnesses or substance abuse disorder, or who are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves, through assisted outpatient treatment or by moving them into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities via civil commitment or other available means to the maximum extent permitted by law. Or 5, substantially implement and comply with, to the extent required, the registration and notification obligations of the Sex Offender Registry and Notification Act, particularly in the case of registered sex offenders with no fixed address, included by adequately mapping and checking the location of homeless sex offenders. That's not such a bad policy, I guess. But otherwise, the rest of it, it's a little bit concerning, folks. But the Attorney General shall ensure that the homeless individuals arrested for federal crimes are evaluated consistent with 18 U.S.C. 4248 to determine whether they are sexually dangerous persons and certified accordingly for civil commitment. I'm guessing civil commitment is a way of applied a way of putting re-education, perhaps, but take all necessary steps to ensure the availability of funds under emergency federal law enforcement assistance. Who do you think has a hand to play in emergency federal law enforcement assistance? That would be our fine friends, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, aka FEMA, to support as consistent with 34 USC 50101 et sec encampment removal efforts in areas for which public safety is at risk and state and local resources are inadequate. Assesses federal resources to determine whether they may be directed towards ensuring, to the extent permitted by law, that detainees with serious mental illnesses are not released into the public because of lack of forensic bed capacity. So maybe there's an alternative. If there's not enough beds to releasing them on the onto the streets, there could possibly be a final solution for these individuals. But where are they? Lack of forensic bed capacity at appropriate state, local and federal jails or hospitals, and enhance requirements that prisons and residential re-entry centres that are under the authority of the Attorney General or receive funding from the Attorney General require in-custody housing release plans and, to the maximum extent practicable, require individuals to re-comply. They can force you to comply, folks. Section 4, redirecting federal resources towards effective methods of addressing homelessness. A, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate action to 1. Ensure that discretionary grants issued by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration for substance use disorder prevention, treatment and recovery fund evidence-based programs and do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. 2. Provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs for individuals with serious mental illnesses or addiction during and after the civil commitment processes focused on shifting such individuals off the streets of public programs and into private housing and support networks. 3. Ensure that federal funds for federally qualified health centers and certified community behavioral health clinics, re-education folks, reduce rather than promote homelessness by supporting to the maximum extent permitted by law comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental health and substance use disorder, including crisis intervention services. B. The Attorney General shall also prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for which such diversion serves public safety. So now it's looking like you can go to court if you have a mental health issue in the United States of America, especially if you're a homeless person with mental health issues. Section 5, increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness programs. A. The Secretary of Health and Humane Services and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate actions to increase accountability in their provision of and grants awarded for homelessness assistance and traditional living programs. These actions shall include, to the extent permitted by law, ending support for housing first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote testament, recovery and self-sufficiency. So no longer, if you're on the streets, are there going to be any funding or any sort of outreach centres or sort of programs that will help you get back up on your feet and put you into housing. That's gone. That's no longer going to be in effect anymore. Your choices are jail or a facility. Self-sufficient, increasing competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool and holding grantees to higher standards of effectiveness in reducing homelessness and increasing public safety. Grantees, I'm guessing that might be private contractors or outsourcing it to other governmental agencies or something like that. I'm not too certain myself. But back to this, Section B, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall, as appropriate, take steps to require recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance to increase requirements that persons participating in the recipients' programs who suffer from substance use or disorder or serious mental illness use, substance abuse treatment or mental health services as a condition of participation. So if there are people, I'm guessing, that are in housing programs and they have substance abuse on their records or mental health issues on their records, then they are going to be using those as conditions for participation in this shelter system, homeless campus. With respect to recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance that operate drug injection sites or safe consumption sites, knowingly distribute drug paraphernalia, or permit the use of or distribution of illicit drugs on property under their control. 1. The Attorney General shall review whether such recipients are in violation of federal law, including 21 U.C.S.C. 856 and bring civil or criminal actions in appropriate cases. And 2, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall review whether such recipients are in violation of the terms of the programs pursuant to which they receive federal housing and homelessness assistance and freeze their assistance as appropriate, cutting folks off to relocate them to shelters. D, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate measures and revise regulations as necessary to allow, where permissible under applicable law, federally funded programs to exclusively house women and children and to stop sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance through such programs from being housed with unrelated children. E, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in a consultation with Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Humane Services, shall, as appropriate and to the extent of permitted by law, 1, allow or require the recipients of federal funding or for homelessness assistance to collect health-related information that Secretary of Housing and Urban Development identifies as necessary to the effective and efficient operation of the funding program from all persons to whom such assistance is provided. And 3, require those funding recipients to share such data with law enforcement authorities in circumstances permitted by law and to use the collected health data to provide appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnoses or to connect individuals to public health resources. Section 6, we're nearly done, folks. General provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect 1, the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof, or 2, the functions of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative, I give up that, I said it right the first time, I think, proposals. But this order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C, this order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. And finally, D, the costs for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that was signed by Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States of America, in the White House, July 24th, 2025. And there you go, guys. And that was as close to coming from the horse's mouth as I can possibly get you, that they are trying to eradicate homelessness, mental health issues, and drug abuse from the streets of the United States of America. So let's take a little break with a couple of videos, and then we're going to come back with some more government documents, this time from the state of Utah.
Plans are emerging to build a sizable new homeless shelter in Salt Lake City. The Utah Office of Homeless Services announced today they have just entered a contract to buy city-owned land in a small farming area on the north end of town, and it's raising concerns for the neighborhood. News specialist Brian Carlson is there live for us. Brian, now go ahead and just walk us through these plans for this new homeless campus.
You bet, Tamara. So this campus is going in right next to I-215, just north of the 2100 North exit. Now, it may be tough to see from these trees here behind us, but you've got 15 acres back here that the state plans to acquire to build Utah's new homeless campus. It may not look like much now, but this farmland near the freeway will likely be home to a new 1,300-bed homeless shelter. The state says will help solve Utah's ballooning homeless crisis. We need a permanent location where we don't have to expand every winter. We need a year-round, 24/7 operation
and with services.
The center expected to come here will bus people in off the street, give them a place to stay, and provide services on site to help them get their lives back together.
One of our purposes is to get people out of the shelter as soon as possible, but not before we've helped them address the challenges that they're facing.
Solving challenges for those who would use it, but creating challenges for the small neighborhood of farmers that live next to it.
I'm struggling to be okay with it. I'm struggling.
I spoke with several people in this small community concerned most with the safety issues that often accompany Utah's homeless.
I want to be empathetic and compassionate, and I also, want to continue. We have a small farm. I want to be able to do that safely.
I go outside and my children go outside at night to check our animals. We have a location that it would be easier for someone if they choose not to go to the facility to try to camp for the night.
Today I shared those concerns with Utah's homeless coordinator, who says he understands why people would be worried.
We're also concerned, and we want to make sure that it's safe for the surrounding community as well as the people that will be on campus.
Now, if anyone wants to learn more about it, there's a public meeting being held tonight at the Dave Riverside Library at 5 p.m. until people can go there, ask questions, as well as share their input. Live here in Salt Lake City, Brian Carlson, KSL 5 News. Back to you.
Yeah, people certainly want to weigh in on this big issue in their neighborhood. Brian, thank you.
Utah has a plan to deal with homelessness, lining up behind President Trump's belief that people should not be allowed to sleep on the streets. State officials say they're preparing to pull more than 1,000 homeless people out of Salt Lake City and into a sprawling campus on the outskirts of town. Supporters call it a place where people can get the services they need. Critics call it a detention camp. Joining us now, New York Times reporter Ellen Berry, who filed that piece from Salt Lake City. So what exactly is this campus, this camp?
So for now, this is still in its planning stages. It hasn't been built, but it is definitely an effort to kind of operationalize the president's executive order from the summer, which said that overwhelmingly homeless people are suffering from mental illness or addiction, and overwhelmingly they should be put into long-term institutional care. That is a reversal of our longstanding approach to homelessness, which has prioritized housing. So this plan is a very large facility that would be devoted in large part to treatment of psychiatric and substance abuse disorders.
So it's kind of, you could argue, bringing back mental health institutions, which had fallen out of favor. There are arguments on both sides of this, as you well know, as you've reported. There are people who say it is not a good idea to let people suffer on the streets, that some people really do need help and they're not capable of getting themselves that help. And there are others that say if you force them into an institution or camp or campus, whatever you want to call it, and you don't allow them to leave, you violate their civil rights, you violate their free will. Do we have a sense of what this campus, if it's actually going to be staffed, if it's actually going to have the resources they need, and how it's going to be funded?
There are lots of questions, and those are some of the most important ones. The proposal, as I understood it, is actually a hybrid with about 1/3 of the beds, a kind of low barrier shelter. So that would be presumably voluntary. And the other 2/3, 800 beds, would be involuntary, either through civil commitment procedures or a diversion program through the courts. So you're sort of looking at a large facility that is in part involuntary and in part voluntary.
Do we know who's paying for this?
Well, it would have to be the Utah legislature, and that is a big question mark, whether there is going to be willingness to fund it. And I think the fear is that if this ball gets rolling and the services are not funded, then it becomes much more of a warehousing type facility and less of a treatment facility. So this is what is not yet clear. It's expensive to create psychiatric beds, and across the country we have a shortage of psychiatric beds for that reason. So expanding psychiatric treatment in this way would be extraordinarily expensive.
Yeah. Ellen Berry. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us now, Utah State Senator. She was featured in that piece, Jen Plum, a Democrat who represents Salt Lake City. She's also an ER physician. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
What are your concerns?
You know, this is a space that I have been passionate about and touched by for decades, starting with my own brother facing heroin dependence and addiction and ultimately losing him to that. And then coming into the space as a clinician and an advocate, and now as an elected person, I think that I share the hopes that many of those thinking in this space are, and then that is what we can get people better lives, and that we can do things with policy that will get people into spaces where they aren't living in such desperation. But seeing this proposal and seeing it come from a homeless services board that doesn't have a single medical person on it to represent what it would take, I'm worried that these good intentions have the potential to lead to wasted time, wasted money, and violations of people's civil liberties. So for me, that's kind of the, in a nutshell, concerns that I have.
That is a good point. And again, I think it's important to remember that there are people that do really need help and are struggling, and there are family members who want their loved ones to get the help that they need. And sometimes, in some cases, voluntary is not necessarily an option. That being said, you are a part of the legislature and you've expressed your concerns. Is there a way to amend any legislation that might come up to make it so that it's mandatory to have a certain number of healthcare professionals, of addiction professionals, psychiatric professionals on staff and there every year in order to make sure that these places don't become detention centers?
I think that's really a crucial point. And how much of that happens in policy and code versus how much of that happens in planning, that all remains to be seen. You know, we've almost hit this inflection point where folks are saying, oh, housing first didn't work. Now we need this treatment first model. And for me, I don't see it that there's opposing camps. I see it that there's the same needs for people. And for me, housing first was supposed to mean get a roof over people's head first, and then get them the treatment they need, the supports they need, the case management they need, the education they need. Housing first, for me, that's what that meant, and then build upon. But our systems didn't necessarily fund those resources, right? So we call it a failure when really it wasn't the structure or the system so much as the resources there.
Yeah.
We're not that far apart on what people need. Where our chasm is the expectation of whether or not we can force people into it or not. I personally know from a fact, from a family member and from a clinician, you cannot force people into wellness. You have to provide an environment that supports them, and they have to want it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's also, I mean, when the institutions were dismantled, there was an idea that they weren't safe spaces, they weren't helpful, and that it would be better for people to be in the community and be treated in the community so they could be closer to family and they could recover and become a functioning part of society. It was that second step that never got followed through on, which has led us to where we are today. Do you have a partner in the legislature right now that is willing to try to put this down on paper to make sure that if this facility does go online, that it can actually be a model of success rather than just another, failed attempt to solve a complicated problem?
You know, I think that there are a number of partners that I can look to, and that I hope we have the kind of collaborative relationships where we can go head on at this as a problem, right? Not as a political problem, but as an actual human problem and as an actual policy response problem. I think we've got to have some honesty about what this is going to cost to build it. I personally don't believe a structure of 14 buildings can be built for $75 million. I know that staffing that facility will take more than $34 million a year. So I think we need to start with some kind of transparency about what it's really going to cost if we're going to try to do something like this. But personally, my hope is that we can get minds together with subject matter expertise and understanding. You know, good intentions that are ill-informed don't help people. They just waste money and they waste time. So my hope is I can find those partners, that our system can come together, not to battle, but to support one another. And let's actually do what's right by people, not just make a splash.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. State Senator Jen Plum, really good to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. I think it's an important story.
So this next government website is homelesscampus.utah.gov, and Utah, an official website, as you can see on there on the side, the right hand side, workforce services, homeless services. Reimagining hope, a bold transformative approach to the Utah campus. Utah is embarking on a new groundbreaking. Let me start that again. Utah is embarking on a groundbreaking new undertaking, a transformative campus to help those experiencing homelessness rebuild their lives. It is located on a 15.85 acre parcel at 2520N22W, Salt Lake City, Utah 84116. The planned facility will provide approximately 1,300 beds, creating a sustainable and a transformative solution to address homelessness in Utah. Designed to complement the existing homeless resource centers, shelters, and service providers throughout Utah, the transformative campus is a place where those experiencing homelessness can help for recovery, mental health, healthcare, employment, criminal justice assistance, and housing through the services and treatment accessible in a single location. This is more than a campus. It's a turning point for Utah of reimagining hope, said Wayne Niederhauser. Niederhauser, that's a little bit German sounding, don't you think? Although it might be Dutch. Nieder sounds a little bit Dutch, but Hauser sounds very German. But he is a retired state homeless coordinator, and it will further fulfill the identified need to provide additional beds and treatment in Utah's homeless response, while providing individuals served by the campus a transformative path from crisis to stability and ultimately thriving. They keep using that word, transformative. Mission. Utah intends to change history. We will help those experiencing homelessness to receive the help and services to move from needing help to begin a new path to thrive. In Utah, we are committed to the proposition that homelessness will be rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Wonder what solutions they have for that. Our vision, the campus is envisioned as a comprehensive hub where individuals experiencing homelessness can access support and treatment they need to move from homelessness to stability and long-term self-reliance. The objective, to help those experiencing homelessness with services and support their guys to realize their inherent dignity and walk the path towards stability and human thriving. Learn more about Utah's guiding principles to address homelessness. And there's a PDF that you can download there, project updates, and that is that article, not exactly the longest of one, but that is an official website, and there they are talking about this transformative shelter system for homeless, a one-stop shop for all your homeless needs, it would seem. And there it is there in a 7. I wonder what that is all about now, but you can see a little bit there of that campus from above that is designed to house homeless people. And Does look a little bit death campy, I must admit myself, although there doesn't seem to be any sort of high walls, barbed wire, offensive guard dogs and machine gun posts. Who knows what sort of security and things they have there to keep individuals inside this, because it does look as though you could possibly walk out of the door and jump through those trees into the fields. But it does look a little bit open and in the desolated sort of area. There's just sort of wilderness by the surrounding, by the looks of the surrounding area. But there you go, guys. As I said, yet another government website and documentation, this time from the state of Utah. So we're here at Google News section. You can see the search bar. I've typed Utah homeless campus. Unfortunately, I really wanted to read that first one because it was from a day ago from the Times. Utah's Trumpian homeless campus. I like the fact that they used the word Trumpian, like dystopian. But unfortunately, it won't let us read it. We have to pay £1 for 6 months or start a trial, which we're not going to do, but that's unfortunate because I did want to see what they were going on about with their Trumpian homeless campus story. But Utah News Dispatch, Utah government Cox proposes millions for the homeless campus. KSL.com, Utah has a grand vision for the homeless. That was from a month ago, 2 weeks ago. Salt Lake Tribune, Cox wants lawmakers to put up millions. The New York Times, not going to click on that because that's also paywalled. In Utah, Trump's vision for homelessness. FreedomUnited.org, that is one we're going to come back to from a month ago. A new homeless campus in we'll come back to that. Could Utah opioid settlement case? I'm not sure what that one is about. But Utah Axios, Utah to open a 1,300-bed campus for the homeless. Utah News Dispatch, Utah unveils a site for a 1,300-bed homeless campus. So let's click on that one and work our way back up. Utah officials unveil a site for a 1,300-bed homeless campus after long secretive search. 5.8-acre Salt Lake City owned property in west of Rose Park near Salt Lake City boundary. There is a picture of it, I think, there, possibly in the distance. Sorry, clicked back to the top there. But after months of a tight-lipped search, state officials announced the piece of property they've zeroed in on for a new 1,300-bed transformative homeless campus. We're going to have to probably put that into an anagram generator. And if anything comes up, maybe I'll include the results in this video. But the Utah Office of Homeless Services and the Utah Homeless Services Board announced early Wednesday morning that state leaders have signed a contractual agreement for the state to acquire a 15.85-acre property that's currently owned by Salt Lake City. That property is located at 2520 North, 2200 West Salt Lake City, and it is in an open field located directly west of I-215 and roughly a mile south from North Salt Lake City's boundaries in Salt Lake City's North Point area. Just south of the property is a warehouse park, and it is to its north is a small agricultural neighborhood. Directly to the east, across I-25, is a horse bordering facility, hunter stable, and arena. It is also located relatively near to the Jordan River OHV State Recreation area. Utah homelessness rose 18% in 2025, the state report says. Is that a picture of a homeless chap pushing a cart outside of the Women's Center. But though Utah's rate of homelessness remains below national average, a new report shows that the state homeless population is continuing to rise, and the start of 2025 marked a significant uptick. It's a big jump, Wayne Niedenhauser, Utah Governor Spencer Cox State Homeless Coordinator, told Utah News Dispatch ahead of the report release on Wednesday. Continue reading. We're not going to, that was just a little subsection. But Wednesday's announcement is a major development for Utah Office of Homeless Services and the Utah Homeless Board in their efforts to increase the state's emergency homeless shelter capacity, while also envisioning not just a shelter but a campus to help people turn their lives around and move out of homelessness. A turning point. This is more than a campus. It's a turning point for Utah of reimagining hope, Wayne Niederhauser said. He is in a prepared statement. It will further fulfill, another FF there, folks, the identified need to provide additional beds and treatment in Utah's homeless response, while providing individuals served by the campus a transformative path from crisis to stability and ultimately thriving. The new homeless campus is envisioned to be a comprehensive hub where individuals experiencing homelessness can access support and treatment they need to move from homelessness to stability and long-term self-reliance, the Utah Office of Homeless Services said. So kind of repeating that report that we just read from the government of Utah. But it is envisioned to be a place where people experiencing homelessness can go for all their services in one place, designed to complement the existing homeless resource centers, shelters, and service providers through Utah. Yada yada, whoop-de-woo, concluding a long secretive search. Throughout their search, state officials have declined to publicly share what properties they've been considering, citing real estate acquisition, privacy considerations. Niederhauser, a former Utah state president who also works as a real estate broker, told Utah News Dispatch in an interview on Wednesday that he started working on the concept of a homeless campus just months after Governor Spencer Cox first appointed him as a state homeless coordinator more than 4 years ago. The goal, he said, was not only to expand Utah's homeless shelter capacity, but also create a long-term solution as the state faces population growth pressures. Interesting choices of words there. I started looking at possibilities where we could expand, and I wanted to have a property so that we could have a place for a 50 to 100 year solution for Salt Lake City, a county area and region, Niederhauser said. I knew earlier that we were going to need to have a location that we could rely upon and expand as populations grow, as we deal with this very difficult problem for many years to come. I just didn't want the state to be having to look at different places every 5 or 10 years. We wanted a long-term solution. It wasn't until last fall that the concept was formalized, when the Utah Homeless Service Board voted to set a deadline of October 1st, 2025 for the campus to be built. But Niederhauser told Utah News Dispatch last month that the deadline likely won't be met, since the search has proven difficult and taken longer than previously expected. Now the first phase of development isn't expected to be finished until sometime in 2027. So that is actually a conceptual rendering and depicts what the state leaders envision for the new transformative campus meant to house and rehabilitate people experiencing homelessness. And that's courtesy of the Utah Office of Homeless Services. Niederhauser said he looked at roughly 50 pieces of property before settling on the North Point parcel as his best choice. This one's a little closer to the city than a lot of the other ones I looked at. He said there isn't a perfect property, but there are some potential challenges with this, but it presented a lot less challenges than the other properties. Niederhauser acknowledged that transportation to the fairly remote area is going to be an issue. I wonder why it's fairly remote, folks. Maybe they don't want to sort of see or smell anything that's going on there. But we've got a solution for that, and that's having a shuttle system. SS again, folks. He said, adding that it will cost money, but the state officials plan to expand the existing shuttle system that transports people to and from existing homeless resource centers in Salt Lake City and South Salt Lake City. We've also been in talks with Utah Transit Authority, he added, and again, remember they transported the Jews and undesirables, or asocials as they were known in Nazi Germany, on trains. We've also been in talks with Utah Transit Authority. He added, I think there's some long-term desire to have even some busing into that area. No mention of trains, but the Nazis also had buses that didn't have exhaust pipes or windows, and many of the people never actually made it to the camps. But Niederhauser said it is an undeveloped area that started to see some commercial development, but there's also a small agricultural neighborhood to the north. The impacts are higher in residential areas, and not that businesses are not impacted, they will be to some degree, but we plan on having every robust public safety and security situation, another SS there, so that the impacts are minimalized, Niederhauser said. Another change is coming to Utah's homeless system. While it's an approach that may sound reminiscent of the past, state leaders insist it's not the same, and it will be a step forward, not backward. In 2019, the Road Home's old downtown homeless shelter that some nights sheltered more than 1,000 people shut. And there's another article you can continue reading there. Though the parcel is 15.85 acres, Niederhauser has previously said state officials would prefer about 30 acres of contiguous land for the campus. However, there's at least two other undeveloped properties bordering Salt Lake City owned parcel that together would bring the total footprint of up to roughly 40 acres. One is a 11.4 acre property owned by the Rose Park stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, according to Salt Lake City Assessor records. Niederhauser said that eventually state officials would like to expand the acreage, and it looks like there's some possibilities for that. He said the state officials have had conversations with the church about that 11.4 acre adjoining parcel, but nothing has been finalized. We know this first phase is where we need a lot of shelter and services. SS again, folks. We know there will be some expansion in the future. The church has expressed some interest, so we've had conversations, but the timing of that is yet to be determined. What will the cost of the property be? Niederhauser said that the contract that's been signed allows for the state to either purchase the land or trade other open space in exchange. He said that the state and city leaders have not yet decided which of those options will be used to finalize the acquisition, pending on the appraisal process. The city and the state did appraisals, and there's some space, another SS there, am I just clutching at straws? There's some space in between them, so we're going to join together in another appraisal to settle on a price, Niederhauser said. He added that various appraisals have valued the land between 5.7 million and 8.8 million, and the 8.8 is very, very telling there. 8 is HH, Heil Hitler, folks. So the final value will be somewhere in between there. My goodness. Well, good. I'm not going to say anything. Niederhauser's office has about 24 million on hand to purchase the land and is starting building the campus, but the entire project is expected to cost much more. Annual operations are expected to be north of 30 million, Niederhauser said, and the cost to build the infrastructure is an estimated $75 million. excluding the land purchase. However, there's a big hurdle that Niederhauser will need to overcome to get the project over the finish line. He'll have to convince the Utah legislator to help pay for it. Tax dollars, folks, will be paying for this. That's going to be a heavy lift, he acknowledged. It's not going to be an easy course to travel, but we'll be engaging with a legislator. We'll be engaging with other potential funders now as we start to plan more detail so we can build a capital stack and operating revenue with the different partners that the state will need to make it happen. Earlier this year, Niederhauser worked with Salt Lake City officials to find a parcel. The Utah legislature passed a bill granting the state entitlement and eminent domain powers to help acquire a city-owned parcel if need be. For this particular property, Niederhauser said that the state ended up not needing to use those domain powers. It is a critical step, SLC Mayor Mendenhall says. Leading up to Wednesday's announcement, Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall, who is also a member of the Utah Homeless Services Board, has been urging the state to act quickly. On August 13th, the day the state report was released, showing an 18% rise in Utah homelessness, Mendenhall said that number should be heard as a battle cry for Utah lawmakers to do more to address homelessness. The mayor also warned that there's inadequate funding to build and non-existent funding to operate a new campus shelter. She urged lawmakers to appropriate more during their 2026 general session in January. Still, the mayor applauded the state announcement as a step forward. Our state has long needed more shelter beds and services, and this campus represents a critical step forward in supporting the most vulnerable people in our communities. Mendenhall said in a prepared statement, by providing a consistent shelter and wraparound services in one location, this facility could also help Salt Lake City first responders by reducing the amount of emergency calls, freeing up law enforcement to focus on public safety and better connecting people to help they need, she added. North Salt Lake Mayor isn't surprised but concerned about impacts. North Salt Lake Mayor Brian Horrocks told Utah News Dispatch on Wednesday morning that he's not surprised state officials chose that property. He said there have been rumblings that the state leaders were looking in that area as they've been talking with the neighbors leading up to the selection. We're mostly disappointed in the process, very secretive, Horrocks said, adding that they told us they would keep us in the loop, and they haven't. The mayor added that North Salt Lake City leaders are looking at options. We can't control what they do in another city, but what we can control, we'll try to control, Horrocks said. Asked for what could entail, he said, for example, we could control the bridge across the Jordan River, and pressed further, Horrocks said, I don't know, I saw a barge hit a bridge in Baltimore, something I covered on this channel. There's a video for that if you want to go and search for that and see what that was all about. Found some very interesting discoveries through that one. But he saw a barge hit a bridge in Baltimore, and that was pretty effective. I'm not sure what he was going on about there, but asked if he meant city leaders are considering destroying that bridge or blockading access from the area into North Salt Lake City. Horrocks said, I don't know what our options are. I'm looking at it from a point of view that we do not necessarily need to provide access to that part of Salt Lake City County. And vice versa, he said. They're free to do whatever they want on their side of the river, and we're free to do what we want on our side of the river. A little bit of upset there, and a little bit of defiances on either side. Horrocks said that he understands homelessness is a tough issue, but he has the city to represent, and he's most concerned with protecting North Salt Lake from its impacts. We'll do what we can do to protect our community and our neighborhood, and they do what they they do, he said. So some conflict between North Salt Lake City and Salt Lake City. But to the mayor's comments, Nita Hauser said the state leaders are focused on the campus and getting something operational. We're focused on making it a place where there's very little impact to the community, so we won't need to block bridges and or other access areas because, it's a safe place for everyone, Nita Hauser said, which suggests it's not maybe a safe place for the homeless people. And again, why do they sort of want it to have as little impact on the community as possible? What impact could it have on the community? I mean, I can think of a few obvious ones, but if people aren't allowed to leave if it's essentially a detention centre, then, if they can't get out, how does that impact the local community? Unless, there's going to be some sort of burn-ins or smells or gases or toxins coming out of that facility. But to the mayor's complaints about the secretive process, Nita Hauser said it's very difficult to find a property and get it under control. So we're going to click on there because it gets a little bit into regional conflicts. We're not going to click on that one because it's pretty much the same one, but this is the one I did want to come back to because this is talking about being forced labor camp. freedomunited.org. Let's end modern slavery together. A new homeless campus in the United States raises fears of forced labor. Fuck off with your pop-ups. You can make your voice heard. You can leave a comment. This U.S. state of Utah is planning to establish a 13-bed homeless campus on the rural land. We know all about that. Trump's order and Utah's plans. In July, President Donald Trump signed the Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets order. We've read that at the start of or towards the start of this presentation, and it threatens to withhold federal funding from states that fail to criminalize public camping. The order also directs the Justice Department to expand involuntary civil commitments for unhoused adults. It requires the Department of Housing and Urban Development to abandon housing first policies. These prioritize stable housing before treatment or sobriety. Within a week, Utah's Republican leaders sent a letter to the state's Homeless Service Board calling for a transformative service-based homeless campus, like your word again, transformative, under a proposal from Randy Shumway. Over 300 beds would be for involuntary commitment. Others would be in an alternative to jail. He called it an accountability center where people could be sanctioned there for about 90 days to detox and receive care. Work-conditioned beds and the 13th Amendment. The beds are not slated for civil commitment, will include work-coordinated housing, Tar said. This is the thing that scares me the most because it means forced labor. Recently, actually, I revisited a video I put out a couple of years ago, and it was titled Canada in Crisis, and that was all about the ongoing Maid saga, but it also included some government documents from the province of Alberta, which contained protocols and employee duties for the overseeing of a labour camp. But back to this article from Freedom United. In a podcast interview, Eric Tars of the National Homelessness Law Centre shared his concerns. We've seen some of these other bills introduced at the state level that also have this kind of forced labour element to them. We're going to be hearing from that individual shortly in another video. But he warned that such policies may fill a looming labour gap. What they're probably doing is forecasting they're going to have a reduction in the labour force with undocumented immigrants being deported, and they got to make up for it somehow. So bring back the labour camps. Very good point, with all these illegal immigrants who do possibly have whole jobs in construction, and that is one of the most prosperous fields of employment if you are an undocumented individual looking for work, because they usually do pay a cash, and I don't really sort of care too much who is doing the work. Kitchens also are a common place for undocumented workforces to earn a living. But TAR's tied today's bills as to old systems of control. A lot of these laws and anti-loitering and anti-camping laws are straight out of Jim Crow, because what that was about, we lost our unpaid labor force, and we need to make up crime so that if you don't have a job, then you are inherently a criminal. We'll pass you through the loophole of the 13th Amendment, and that says slavery is abolished except as punishment for a crime, and then we'll make everybody who you know we need to go back out into the fields a criminal, criminalizing poverty under the guise of care. If TARS is right, Utah and the United States are heading down a dark path. The homeless are already a population most at risk for trafficking and abuse. Measures such as these punish poverty, turn homelessness into a crime, and expand systems of coercion. They therefore do not address the real causes of homelessness, unaffordable housing, stagnant wages, and inequality. What Utah ultimately builds remains unclear. For now, the plan sits uneasily between care and control, its future depending on which vision takes shapes once the gates open. And that is at the end of that article. There are some documents there, but as you can see, guys, there's quite a bit of stuff out there on this topic, and as I said, we're not going to click on too many. I did want to just click on those ones that we did to give you a little bit of insight as to what is going on. So the facility hasn't actually been built yet, but they have obtained the site and are planning to start building it shortly. So let's break up the endless reading of articles with another couple of videos, and then we will come back with one last article before we wrap things up.
Now, and some pushback may be coming over a new sprawling campus for the homeless.
Two longtime neighbors of the site are opposed, and one city is not ruling out a legal challenge. Brian Malahi live near the selected campus location tonight. Brian?
This is where homeless services leaders in the state say it's the place. But not everybody may be all aboard the wagon train. Northeast of Salt Lake International, near I-215, where warehouses sprout on ground crops once grew.
I've been here my whole life, fourth generation.
Dennis Bangeter.
They're promising, safety, but they don't know.
And Phil Kunkel decry a new addition, a planned 1,300-bed homeless campus.
I just don't think it's the proper place for it.
Well, the announcement of the location came out as a total surprise to people.
And to you?
And to us.
Ken Leatham, city manager next door in North Salt Lake, where the mayor even suggested knocking down this Jordan River bridge to cut off the planned campus from his community.
Will you rule out North Salt Lake taking legal action to challenge the siting of this campus?
Yeah, I can't really answer that right now. I mean, that would be a decision made by our elected officials, so I really can't rule that out.
So the city manager is more measured than the mayor. The mayor told me on the phone today, he said this, whole issue about getting rid of the bridge and restricting access, that he said was tongue-in-cheek. Still, you heard from the city manager. North Salt Lake is not ruling out potential legal action. Here, live in Salt Lake, Brian Malahi, KUTV 2 News.
It's a tale of one city, two perspectives.
Of our efforts to create more deeply affordable housing, to create more shelter, is in response to this information that we're getting.
We should not be surprised to find that more people are losing their housing due to financial and economic pressures when we couple it with the inadequate statewide housing stock.
Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall and State Homeless Coordinator Wayne Niederhauser sounding off on the state's annual homelessness report.
How do we combat those two things? A growing state, which also means that our homeless population will probably grow.
Yeah, well, we need to focus on a lot of things that we're already doing. The state enacted, and we appreciate the legislature for their leadership on this, is we have a state low-income housing tax credit. Not every state has that.
What's more, I'm extremely concerned by the lack of forward momentum from legislative leaders to address this growing statewide crisis.
Mayor Mendenhall says as it stands, there's just not the support available to assist the homeless population that we now know has grown sizably since last year. According to the newly released report, the 2025 point-in-time count, also known as PIT count, showed 4,584 Utahns experiencing homelessness on a single night, an 18% increase from the previous year. Children experiencing homelessness increased from 589 to 662, a 12% increase. The number of Utahns over age 64 experiencing homelessness rose from 251 to 356, an increase of 42%. In total, homelessness as reported by the PIT rose to 715 people compared to the previous year.
It seems like there's a difference of opinion, I'll put it like that, between maybe the governor's office, the mayor's office, when it comes to how we actually address homelessness in the state. So now that we have this data and we know, okay, more people are homeless, now what?
Well, let's talk about a couple of things that the data tells us. One of the things, this 18% increase at 715 people additionally counted as homeless on our point-in-time count. The silver lining there is 95% of those were in shelter.
Niederhauser noting that typically we'd see an increase in unsheltered homeless folks and that the state has a plan to create more options.
Do you anticipate that we will have more resources? I know we've talked about having more beds, right? But beyond that?
Well, I mean, the legislature has acted. We also received $25 million to help build a campus. We're trying to land on a piece of, I shouldn't say land on, but we've identified several pieces of land that could work. We're doing some due diligence on those properties. So, you know, the legislature has shown that they're willing to address this.
To our state leaders, your partners are here. We are ready and willing to work with you, and the changes that are needed are clear. As your partners, we have a plan for 1,300 more shelter beds. We have made land available, yet as of today, we have only 1/3 of the capital funding needed to build the first phase, and not a penny of operational capital.
Beyond the sheer demographic breakdown of the numbers, the report does point to some improvement. 75% of emergency shelter stays were 90 days or less, down from 80%, although the length of stay in emergency shelter increased by 10 days, a 17% increase. But individuals staying 12 months or more was only 2%. That remains steady. Niederhauser says recovery is where we should focus our efforts.
It is a lot to ask to keep someone off the streets. So what's the best approach to that?
Well, the data shows us in our annual report that the amount of people coming back to homelessness was reduced slightly, which we appreciate that. It's at least a stabilized figure. But it's recovery support that really makes a difference.
Robin Oginye, Fox 13 News, Utah.
I'm Fox 13 News reporter Avery Klanowski in West Valley City, having conversations with people about the recent rise in Utah's homelessness population. How long have you been here?
I want to say roughly about 8 months.
This is Alan Wiegand.
This place is amazing.
He's one of SwitchPoint's overflow shelter guests.
They take care of you. They listen to you. I mean, we have rules, and they're very strict on them.
According to the 2025 point-in-time survey, more than 4,500 Utahns experience homelessness on a single night. That's an 18% increase from the previous year.
The other thing that really scares me, I'm seeing a lot more younger and younger people.
I asked Alan what brought him to this shelter. He told me he'd been supporting his late wife through her sickness.
The bills and the services and stuff like that, it just wiped me out.
Things are expensive now.
Yeah.
Like never before.
Like never before.
Now he's looking for his next career opportunity.
I know there are a lot of people here that want to work, that are just having a hard time finding a job. And that's all we want. We don't want a handout, just a hand up.
Switch Point Center in West Valley has had their doors open since November 2023.
And we have not slowed down at all. From the very beginning, within 3 weeks in, we were at full capacity.
Which was 170 guests, but since has moved up to 190.
A lot of people struggle to find employment.
Switch Point offers help with food, education, medical, among many other things. Alan says even when he does secure a job, high prices are still a concern.
Deposits, your bills, your utilities, your food. You know, one person's not going to be able to do that, you know? And that scares us.
But each day the shelter gives him support to where he wants to go.
You know, Miss Paulina, she's amazing. She doesn't take crap, but she's amazing. She scares me a little bit.
Really gives me a sense of purpose and passion to take on the role that I have and do my very best.
Alan gives us a good reminder. If you can look up, you can get up.
Sometimes it's just life knocked us down, and we're trying to get up.
In West Valley City, Avery Klanowski, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Religious leaders and advocates for Utah's homeless take political leaders to church over what they call a mega shelter in Salt Lake City.
They are the ones with the moral failing.
I'm Ben Winslow. The project is planned for this area behind me in Salt Lake City's North Point neighborhood, but residents and advocates for Utah's poor say it's a bad location for many reasons.
A hodgepodge of bad ideas.
Dozens gathered on the edge of a field near what could be the site of the state's new homeless shelter to protest it.
Human lives, human souls are not a business.
They include ministers and those who work with people experiencing homelessness.
It lacks any sense of compassion, any sense of understanding that we have root causes to folks being unsheltered in our community. It speaks to the fact that we would rather warehouse people involuntarily, and let's be clear, involuntary sheltering is imprisonment.
The proposal is for a 1,300-bed shelter on about 16 acres of land in the North Point neighborhood of Salt Lake City. It would be a campus with a number of services included, but it's plans for space for involuntary commitments that also concern some neighbors.
The Homeless Services Board has been unable to share any details about safety plans. They've mentioned safety on the site, but not what they would do in the surrounding community.
Its location is also far from a lot of major transit lines. Environmentalists are opposing the shelter site because wetlands will get paved over, and they say there's a big mosquito problem. Critics also question if the services promised will ever materialize.
I can't say that it will. I mean, other than having a roof over your head, that's really about it. Being so far away from social services, being so far away from community, I can't imagine how isolating that would feel.
The group is delivering a letter to lawmakers on Utah's Capitol Hill, signed by more than 1,300 people and organizations opposed to it.
With so many agencies that work with folks that are lacking shelter and thriving wages and health care, I'm hoping this will add to that tidal wave of folks saying, hey, wait a minute, because this could be me next.
Now, the State Office of Homeless Services did not comment on the demonstration. Instead, they referred me to a website where they answer questions about the project. They point out that a feasibility study is still underway with a lot of planning to do, and they'll keep working with the local community on it. In Salt Lake City, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Like I say, I want to welcome Jesse Rabinowitz, Communications Director for the National Homeless Law Center, to the show. And Jesse, you were just telling us, but I don't think people heard it. There in Utah is planning some type of camp for unhoused people. Tell us what you know about this.
We know that this camp and this idea should send chills up everyone's spine. We should not have to be saying out loud that forcing people into a camp is a bad idea, but that is where we are yet again in this country. Utah's governor, inspired by the Trump administration's attacks on homeless people, is proposing to create what will be the largest government-run detention camp for homeless people, with upwards of 1,300 beds, including 800 beds where people will be forcibly held against their will. This diverts funding from proven solutions to homelessness like housing and support to instead build a literal detention facility for people who just can't pay the rent. It's shameful and it must not happen.
What is the authority to I mean, is this a jail? Like, what is the authority that Utah has to put people in a concentration camp?
I love that question. So there is a growth of anti-homeless laws springing up around the country that largely stem from a billionaire-backed right-wing think tank called the Cicero Institute, which was founded by Palantir CEO Joe Lonsdale. And the Cicero Institute has been moderately effective in passing anti-homeless laws at the state level, including in Utah. So Utah has a law on the books, thanks to these billionaires, that says it is illegal to sleep outside. So now what Utah is going to do is say your choice is either to go to jail or your choice is to go to a detention camp in the middle of nowhere. Those aren't real choices, and they don't solve homelessness. They make homelessness worse.
I remember that name because it's so, egregiously libertarian sounding, the Cicero Institute. Because last year I remember there was a story about this guy in Texas and how effective he had been. I believe it was in Austin, right? This the tech billionaire Joe Lonsdale, who's his data stuff has been used by ICE, the CIA. Mm-hmm. He did a documentary with PragerU. So this is like deeply, deeply right-wing stuff.
Okay, but back to the point of the thing, like how long will people, like, okay, you get a jail term and someone says you have broken the law because you have no home. How long are people like forced to stay in this concentration camp?
We don't know.
So there's just no structure to this whatsoever. Like but the law is on the books that you can go to jail. So are they putting people in jail right now in Utah?
Well, what they're doing right now, the governor released his budget, I believe, last week and included $45 million to fund this detention camp. And right now it's our understanding that there is still a significant chunk of cash that they need, and we expect them to be asking HUD to fund the rest. I want to remind folks that HUD Secretary Scott Turner was asked during his confirmation hearing if he supported forcing homeless people in detention camps, and he failed to answer. We believe that anyone who cannot unequivocally say forcing people into detention camps is not only not fit to run HUD, they're just not fit to run the federal government. But it's important that we remember Trump has talked about this for a long time. This is something he has campaigned on. And now these billionaires at the Cicero Institute are really shaping homelessness policy. It should scare all of us. And honestly, everyone who cares about justice needs to be mobilizing against these attacks on people who can't afford rent.
And so they have tens of millions of dollars. They're looking for federal grants to build this. I assume this is all going to some type of private prison company that will build this facility. Have they started to build it?
They haven't started to build it yet. They're still waiting on the rest of the funding. So the governor's budget came out a few weeks ago, and that was the first indication that this was a top priority for Governor Cox. So now we are looking to see where they plan to get the rest of the funding.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about that connection then with the Trump administration. Like, how intimate is that connection? Because it appears like, based on what, we've been speaking about, that this is pretty directly linked to some of Trump's top donors.
Well, I want to say two things about that. One is that Donald Trump is using homelessness as a wedge issue to enact his authoritarian takeover of the country. Where I am in DC, it is no secret that his federal occupation of DC began with attacks on homeless people. And I was there when federal agents harassed homeless people and when the government threw away people's belongings for sleeping outside. And when we think about Trump's attacks, we often think about his attacks on immigrants, his attacks on trans folks, which are urgent and demand focus, but we also need to focus his attacks on homeless people. And then Joe Lonsdale, the former Palantir CEO billionaire, is good friends with folks like J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. And when we see the homelessness policy coming out of the White House, it has the Cicero Institute's fingerprints all over it. Billionaires are the last people in this country who should be shaping homelessness policy because they don't care and they don't know what it's like to do the work or to experience homelessness. We know that despite what these billionaires say, the solution to homelessness is housing and supports, not handcuffs or detention camps.
Is there any attempt by in Utah? And I imagine this is like, what we're seeing is a proof of concept type of program, right? Like a pilot program for the rest of, I would imagine, mostly red states for the most part. But are they expending any money to build housing, to provide housing, to in any other programs for unhoused people in Utah?
Utah has a definite lack of shelter capacity and a lack of housing that people can afford. One of the things that's so insidious about this detention camp is that it actually will take the money that should be funding housing and supports and also mental health care and instead redirect that funding to the creation of a detention camp. So they're actively taking money away from the solutions to fund this cruel, inhumane, and ineffective project.
It's almost like a blend of debtors' prisons, which are supposed to be illegal in this country, and involuntary commitment to mental institutions from the 20th century. That's what it feels like, a combination of, and it's federalized, or at least it has federal backing.
I think that's absolutely right. We know that in no time in this country or in history has rounding people up and forcing them into camps been a good thing. But that is exactly what Utah, with the backing of the Trump administration, is working towards. It's shameful and we have to stop it. Thankfully, there are amazing advocates in Utah working at the city and state level to stop this, and we're honored to support them in their advocacy and working to make sure that this deranged plan in Utah doesn't go anywhere else.
We got Utah, and I guess on the IM saying that there is at the package stores, the liquor stores, the government one, the state-owned ones, there's an option to round up purchases to help with homelessness services. Is that where this money is going towards? Are they building a fund right now to build this camp, or do you not know?
I don't know. I'm not certain, but I know that small little changes like that are not actually going to fund those solutions to homelessness. In order to solve homelessness, we have to fix our housing system, which right now only works for people like Joe Lonsdale, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. And we have to build a housing system where everyone, regardless of what they do, what they look like, or where they're from, has a safe place to live. That is not what Utah is doing. Utah is showing us the exact wrong thing to do. But I know that in cities and states across the country, more and more people are recognizing that the rent is too damn high, and that when the rent goes up, so does homelessness. And we are going to force our elected officials to focus on real proven solutions to homelessness, like housing and support.
Where is there a state in the country that is actually doing stuff that you, I mean, I imagine a lot of your time is spent talking about stuff that is like scary, like this, frankly. Are there states that are doing it correctly?
There are cities and states across the country that are doing the best they can with limited resources. And we know that when folks get housing and support, they don't experience homelessness anymore and they thrive. I used to be a homeless street outreach worker in DC, and watching my clients connect to housing was transformative for their lives and for the community. But the truth is, more people are entering into homelessness than we can support, because the federal government has abdicated their responsibility, not just under the Trump administration, under many previous federal administrations. We have to stem the flow of people into homelessness, and that requires fundamentally reshaping our housing system and moving away from a profit-driven housing system and one towards a realization that everybody needs a place to stay and a place to live. But housing first, this idea that we can match people with housing and support, works. It has over a 90% approval rating. I'm sorry, not a 90% efficacy rating. The only people who are trying to poke holes in that are people like the billionaires at the Cicero Institute who have an agenda to gain.
And you know, that 90% effectiveness, it seems to me that one of the talking points that we hear on the right is focused on the 10% that it's not effective for. There are people who have serious mental or emotional challenges who are on the street. There are people who are on the street who don't want who don't want to be in a house. But again, I would imagine that the percentage of those people who have some mental or emotional challenges is pretty high. What that seems to always be put in the sort of the front of the line in terms of like saying, well, this is why we've got to send everybody to some type of like a concentration camp or, a mental facility. When in fact, about 90% of those people would, if you gave them the opportunity to live in a place, and they would, maybe even higher. But what do you do about those remaining things, or those folks, as a way of addressing what seems to be the big talking point on the right?
Well, first, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you were on a lifeboat and there were 10 people in your lifeboat and there were 5 life rafts, 5 people drowned, 5 people survived, you wouldn't say the life vests don't work. You would say we need more of them. But right now, the right is trying to say, throw away all of the life vests. That won't work. Number 2, stop making homelessness worse. Stop cutting budgets that force people into homelessness or force people who were homeless and now stably housed back into homelessness. Stop passing laws like these aggressive anti-homeless laws that we've seen spread across the country since the Grants Pass ruling about 17 months ago. But everyone needs a place to live, and a place to live is the foundation for getting your health back on track, finding employment, reconnecting with your loved ones. And we know that getting someone in housing first and then surrounding them with the wraparound resources that they want and need works time and time again. We also know that most people who have a mental health issue or a drug use issue will never be homeless. And most people who use drugs or have mental health issues will stay in housing for their entire lives. So we have it backwards. We're looking to blame people for individual failings, but the fact is our politicians are asleep at the wheel. Half of people in this country struggle to pay rent. Housing is too expensive. Healthcare is too expensive. Food is too expensive. The solution is to help people, not to force them into a literal government-run detention camp. But again, that is exactly what Utah wants to do. I have to say that as a social worker, this idea of forced institutionalization is deeply, deeply unsettling. It is unethical. But we also know it doesn't work. Emma was talking about these debtors' prisons and these institutions. We used to do forced institutionalization in this country, and we don't anymore. We stopped doing it because it was ineffective and it didn't work. But again, the Trump administration wants to bring us backwards to a time where you could throw people in jail for being poor, sick, and disabled. We must not let them.
Jesse Rabinowitz, Communications Director for the National Homelessness Law Center. We'll put a link to that organization. Folks want to help your work. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
So here we are now at our final article of the day from NPR.org, and this article was released on September the 11th, 2025 of this year, although there isn't an awful lot of this year left. It's soon to be next year in a matter of 10 days or so at the time of recording. But this article from NPR.org, we can actually listen to it, but Trump wants to force people into treatment for substance abuse and mental health issues, and it's by Deborah Becker, so hopefully we shouldn't have too much problem listening to this.
The president wants to force people into treatment for substance use and for substance abuse and mental health issues. In an executive order over the summer, the president called for putting homeless people into, quote, long-term institutional settings for humane treatment, and he asked the Attorney General to try to reverse court rulings that would get in the way of that. There's a track record here. In Massachusetts, people have been ordered into civil commitment for decades. The state has one of the highest rates of involuntarily committing people to treatment. So how's that working out? From Air Station WBUR, Deborah Becker reports.
Boston business leader Sue Sullivan is driving behind a private security officer patrolling an area that, until 2 years ago, was the site of a large tent encampment. It's a busy area. There's a hospital, a food bank, and a jail. There are also several agencies offering help with homelessness, mental health, and addiction. Nearby, small groups are gathered on sidewalks. A few people are nodding off, and some are openly using drugs. The businesses that hired this security and area residents want to make sure people get services and leave.
It is not acceptable for the quality of life of everyone that someone has to come out of their house with their children and have someone shooting up in the neck on their front step.
En route to the area of Allerton Street.
Many residents in community meetings recently have called for more police. Sullivan says the city should either arrest or civilly commit more people to treatment. And she knows that's controversial, especially in Massachusetts, where half of the involuntary treatment beds are in jails and prisons.
We're not trembling on civil rights. We are giving people options to get better.
Under a 1986 Massachusetts law known as Section 35, a family member or law enforcement can ask a judge to commit someone to addiction treatment. If a judge determines that a person's substance use poses harm to themselves or others, they're sent to a secure facility for up to 90 days. The rate of civil commitments in Massachusetts has been slowly declining in recent years, but the courts still send thousands of people to treatment each year.
On the whole, we know that it's not an effective tool, that it doesn't work, that it is often harmful for people.
That's Dr. Dave Munson with Boston's Healthcare for the Homeless program. He served on a commission that studied the law. A 2019 report from that commission showed a higher risk of relapse and overdose after involuntary versus voluntary treatment. That's what happened to 28-year-old Kiana Pearson. She was committed a few years ago. She says it did little more than take her inside for a few weeks.
The day I got out, I got high. You can't force somebody. Doesn't matter how long they're there. They say you're not ready, they're not ready. So I overdosed 8 times in a week when I got out.
Pearson says being committed made her feel worse about herself. She didn't connect with the providers, and there was no follow-up after she left.
It was terrible.
Why?
Because I didn't think I had a problem. I definitely had a problem.
President Trump's executive order calls for expanding civil commitments throughout the country. Sarah Porter is head of the nonprofit Victory Programs, an addiction treatment provider in Boston. She isn't opposed to civil commitment, but she says it's being overused as a potential quick fix to a vexing problem.
Sometimes that is a life-saving tool, but a life-saving tool and a solution to the problem are not the same thing.
Local law enforcement is looking toward other potential solutions. Jim Borgasani, a spokesman for Boston's district attorney, says prosecutors know that steps such as improving long-term treatment and housing can be more effective.
Section 35 was not intended as a measure to help clean up streets. It really wasn't.
Kiana Pearson hopes authorities will keep reviewing alternatives to forcing people into treatment.
People forget, these are some people's aunts, brothers, mothers, fathers, sisters, cousins. These are human beings.
She's on methadone, but says she's reluctant to go to treatment. Her experience with involuntary commitment was so bad, she says, it's worth spending another Boston winter living outside under a bridge. For NPR News, I'm Deborah Becker in Boston.
The president wants to force people into...
Goodness, sorry, I clicked twice there. So thank you, Deborah Becker, for reading us that article and saving my eyes and my voice from having to read it. So as I said, guys, I really wanted to sort of include that mainly because it was released on September the 11th. But as I said, it does highlight some enforcements of treatment, involuntary treatment, and the other sort of options, that some of these people is jail, involuntary treatment, and we heard that some of these sort of involuntary treatment centres are actually in jails and inside of prison facilities. So that's it for the articles for today. Let's head back to the virtual basement to wrap the proceedings up for this evening. And that is about it, folks, and thus almost concludes yet another installment of unwatchable content. But for those of you who have watched today's video. I'm hoping that at the very least you found it interesting and maybe a little bit informative, and at the very best I think there should be a little cause for concern, as much as I don't like to be an alarmist on this channel, and I do like to tell you guys that do happen to tune in and watch regularly here at my channel. Make of it what you will, but there has to be a little bit of concern when they are starting to suggest that a fine solution to the ongoing homeless situation is to forcibly put them into camps against their will. Now this camp in Utah is yet to have a paving stone laid, and it's going to be a couple of years before it is in completion, but you know, the preparations are there. In the United States, as I've mentioned, is starting to sound an awful lot like Nazi Germany, and if that is something that doesn't really concern you, then I don't really know what to say. As I do say, make of it what you will, and it's a little bit disturbing if you are making of this that it's can only be a good thing, and Donald Trump is doing wonderful things in his second term in office. Now, another interesting sort of thing that did come to light within the last sort of couple of days regarding Donald Trump, and was something I was going to consider including in this video, but time restraints prohibited that. But I did see that recently this week, Donald Trump has declared that next year, to celebrate or commemorate the 250-year anniversary of the United States, he has announced he will be holding, I think it's the Patriot Games. And many people are saying here it is, it's the Hunger Games. He's introducing the Hunger Games to society, with some other sort of disturbing reports from the last sort of week or two about sort of food companies having to shelve items for poisonous, toxinous ingredients. There might well be a desire for food in the coming months, and who knows what people will be willing to do in order to feed themselves. But the reason I do mention this in sort of regards to the similarities to what's going on in contemporary United States as to what went on in Nazi Germany back in the 1930s was the radicalization of the youth. Of course, Hitler had the infamous Hitler Youth Policy, which was pretty much a mandatory program that young people of adolescence age were sort of forced into, and the purpose for this was the young mind is easier to mold, and at a very young mind, these poor Germans during the regime of the National Socialist Party were sort of forced they thought they were sort of choosing to go into this, but they was a sort of enforced policy. But they indoctrinated the youth, and many of these sort of activities that the Hitler Youth carried out and conducted sort of annually were games and events, athletic type, mini Olympics, to try and test the region against region, or in the United States case for this Patriot Games, or whatever Trump is going to call his version of the Hunger Games. They are going to select the best boy and the best girl from every single state in the United States and bring them together. I think it's about a 4-day or a week-long event where they are going to be pitted against one another in a series of athletic track and field type of events. And Trump even went out of his way to even point out that there wouldn't be any boys taking part in girls sporting events. Now, another thing that we did see in that brief AI overview at the start of this presentation was that Hitler also had a social cleansing policy, and some of the individuals that were targeted for social cleansing were people from the gay, lesbian, what would today be called the LGBTQ community. And there's been a sort of rise in the last few years of certainly teenagers entering into transhumanism or transgenderism. Transhumanism is on its way and is already here. Topics for another day and topics we have already covered. But these sort of transgender sports stars, like boys who have declared that they identify as females and have entered into women's sporting events and have sort of mopped the floor with the competition, run away with the gold medal on every occasion that is had. But Donald Trump did make a point of saying that there wouldn't be any boys competing in girls' events. And, is this going to be one of the next things on the Trumpian agenda to, once they've sort of rounded up all the immigrants, once they've rounded up all the sort of homeless people with drug problems and mental health issues, are they going to go after the LGBTQ community, who already have their own identifying label in the form of the rainbow? Many people sort of wear rainbow ribbons or rainbow pins on their clothing, identifying factors, labeling systems. In modern times, we have things like hashtags, we have things like memes, we have social media accounts, that all of our data can be compiled together to determine exactly who we are, and nothing is really private anymore in this day and age, and all of our information is available to the highest bidder to do with as they will. Times are more than concerning, and it is a little bit worrying when you do see what was once considered the home of the free, land of the brave, the white hats, the hero of the day, the United States of America, resorting to tactics from the National Socialist Handbook. And is or not Trump the next Führer? That is something to be seen. I'm not a particular fan of politics in general, and have never ever voted in my life, and sort of find it a little bit hard when sometimes families are divided over who they vote for, and how I think it's a little bit arrogant perhaps to consider that all the wrongs in the world can be blamed on people who didn't vote for the same political party as you. But politics and left and right, this is the wings of the same bird, and it is the head of the bird that directs the wings. The wings just help it get to where it's needed to be going, and at the moment it does seem as though the right wing is flapping far more vigorously than the left in the United States. So let's leave it at that for this evening, guys. As always, I'd love to know what you have, what thoughts and opinions you have on this evening's topics about this suggested homeless campus due to be built in Utah there, and if or not you believe that this is resembling Nazi Germany, and you're in agreement with my opinion on this, I'd love to hear it. And again, if you're not in agreement, I'd also love to hear your opinions. We don't keep things as an echo chamber, and why I do request for comments is because I do like to hear alternative opinions other than mine. But there you go, guys. As I said, that is it for this evening. All that is left for me to say is, until we see you again, may the force be with us all. Remember to be excellent to each other, and until next time, take care. This is Ardy, signing out for now.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
Hey, Luke. May the force be with you.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.